everybody, and welcome. And for this Q&A as part of the Tunisian Crochet Summit, I am delighted to be joined by Julie from Accrochet. So I'm just putting us live in Facebook there, so I think that is good to go now. So if you are joining us and you haven't already registered for the summit, we do have a little QR code up in the top corner there, so you can scan that and register. And you still have plenty of time to view all of today's presentations and also to review the live Q&A sessions from yesterday and today as well. So there's still time, you haven't missed out on too much. So welcome from Pennsylvania. I know we had an earlier start this morning, and it was great actually to see so many people from the US joining us, even though it was quite early for them. So a lot of people were saying that they had their coffee ready. So thank you for taking the time to pop in. Good morning from Florida. Hi, Ray. You've been on all of our lives. I think it's fantastic. Thank you so much for coming. So Julie, would you like to just introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your business and how you got started with Tunisian? And I know you do lots of other things in the crochet world as well. So you have some tech editing and other business activities going on. So yeah, share whatever you like.
All right. Well, let me know if I take up too much time talking, because I've been known to do that. So my name is Julie. I'm a French Canadian. I live just north of Montreal. I started to design crochet patterns in 2010, I believe. I was teaching crochet at a local yarn store at the time. And for some reason, I was told by a lot of the knitters there that it was impossible to crochet socks, which I knew it wasn't impossible. But when you say something like that to me, I'm going to prove you wrong. So I started designing a lot of crochet sock patterns. I like to design them from the toe up so that people can try them on as they go and make the adjustments that they need. It was not very long after that I discovered Tunisian crochet. I know I don't pronounce it the same way you do.
I'm definitely
I saw in your day one video about how there are two different pronunciations for it, and I tried to say it like you do, but I just can't. Yeah, so I got into Tunisian crochet pretty early on, and I absolutely love it. I love how it's like kind of a hybrid of knitting and of crochet. It's sort of like a gateway between the two for knitters to get into crochet, but also for crocheters to get into knitting. And so I started to design patterns for that. And I can't just do one thing. I get bored very easily. I like to do a lot of things, and I like to teach myself a lot of things. I was also that kid during summer that would play school with the neighborhood kids. Like I would be the teacher and I would correct their work and give them assignments. And so tech editing just sort of naturally came into my life as something I enjoyed doing. And I do that for knitting and crochet. And then the other thing I do a lot of, so I teach, I design, I tech edit, but I also translate patterns between French and English. Because one thing that I want to be able to do is to bring more people to designers' audiences, but also more patterns to people that may understand English, but not enough to be able to follow a technical document in English. So I love to be able to do that for French speakers. And last but not least, I also founded a collective of other French speakers with crochet businesses, just to help us be found in the very Anglophile World Wide Web. It's very niche already to have a crochet business, but to have a crochet business as a French speaker is even a little bit nichier. So working together, we get to promote crochet and troubleshoot business stuff. And there's 40 of us right now in Canada and Europe, France, Belgium, those sorts of places. And we're hoping to take over the world.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yeah, I think you're right. Like most patterns are in English, aren't they? I know there are quite a lot in Spanish as well. So I'm in Spain,
Yes.
I'm in South America, and here in Spain, crochet is quite big. But I feel like getting your pattern translated, like you really want to trust the person that's doing it.
Yes.
And because you write patterns in English and French, and you're very obviously a bona fide crochet designer, it's easy to see how somebody would be very comfortable handing over their pattern to you to translate. Whereas sometimes if it's somebody that you don't know, just because they offer a translation service, you're actually not sure how it's going to turn out.
It does. You do have to be familiar with crochet and knitting if you're going to translate patterns. You can't just give that work off to a regular translator because the language of patterns is very specific. And for instance, the word for pattern in French can also mean boss, as in you're the boss at work.
All right.
So you know, a translator not familiar with the subject might not do the correct translation.
There are nuances. Yeah,
But
I prefer the camera. Someone had just said there that they love your hook collection. It's very impressive.
I collect 5mm hooks, and there's other pieces there, and that's not the entire collection. There's like a whole other shelf above that with more hooks.
So is it basically anytime you travel somewhere new and you have an
I don't
opportunity
even
to buy a 5mm hook, you'll just buy the hook?
I order them online. Oh no, I have not limited myself to hooks I see in person. If I see them online and I fall in love, I just order them.
Do you know how many you have in the collection?
I know that it's more than 200, but I don't know exactly how many.
Okay. And do you have a few that you use consistently, or do you try and give them all a turn?
So here's the thing. I started collecting 5mm hooks at the start of my crochet career, and that's the hook I use the most. But then I started designing socks and Tunisian patterns. So I'm more with the Tunisian hooks or the 3.5mm hook.
Yeah.
So I rarely use the collection. I use it for pictures mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I
And
love
then someone mentioned to me, Pamela Stark, who is a former crochet designer and now works for Furls Hooks, told me that I should have collected J hooks because then they'd be monogrammed. And I was really sad not to have thought about that because it would be the J hook for Julie. And I failed to see that when I started.
that.
I can't restart the collection. My husband will move out, but you know.
Oh, I love it. That is the best idea for a collection that I have ever.
Yep, it's too late.
I think I might have to jump on this bandwagon.
Well, H hooks, my mom's name is Hélène. That starts with an H, so it's in honor of my mom that I collect 5mm hooks. Let's just say that.
Let's just say that that's good. I don't know if there's any S hook. No.
That would be pretty big.
Different type of hook, I think, isn't it? Okay. Okay, so Julie, I do have some questions here from the people pre-submitted. And if anyone is here live with us and you want to ask Julie anything about entrelac in particular, because that's what her class is on, but also anything basically Tunisian crochet related, I can pretty much guarantee going to be able to answer your question. So work away. All right, so I'm going to copy over one of the questions here because it's a bit long for me to read out. So let me just add this here. So Dee is asking about doing corner to corner using the entrelac method.
Right. So here's the thing. With corner to corner, you're working, you're creating. I'm going to try and make sentences. It's not that early. I've been up for a while, but so I'm looking at the question. If I'm working C to C, I'm working blocks the same way that I would be working blocks if I am doing the entrelac method. So basically, each block in my C to C can be used in entrelac. I'm not explaining it very well, but shoot, I know what I'm trying to express, and it's not coming out. So the blocks that were 5 stitches by 5 rows, adding those numbers together, and then add 10 times 4. Would you use the same formula for C to C? Yes, actually, you would. But you might want to do 4 by 4, 3 by 3, because it depends on how big your block is for your C to C. A lot of if you're drawing something, then you might have smaller blocks because you're treating them like pixels. So you could even go down to 2 by 2. It might not be the most fun experience in terms of entrelac if you do it that way. I would go like I always prefer like 4 by 4, 5 by 5, or 6 by 6. So it would be a blown up image rather than very detailed. Um,
Mm. So you could follow a regular corner to corner pattern with entrelac, but it's probably going to be bigger. Or could you use
yeah,
like thinner yarn? Just go down on the yarn and keep it 3 by 3 or 4 by 4. And
absolutely. Absolutely. If you go with a like as long as you're very patient, which is always the thing, right? If you're trying to use finer yarn for more detailed results,
it's going to
then
take.
yes,
Mhm.
it will take more time. However, the result would be completely stunning. And what I love is that the reverse will also look just as good. I love the behind of a Tunisian simple stitch or a Tunisian knit stitch. I think they look just as
It looks
fabulous. The
different.
texture is amazing.
Yeah. So if you're doing corner to corner, you start off with one little square, and then
Yeah,
your row
and
has two,
then the next
your next one has three, and so on. So you're kind of increasing diagonally, um,
exactly.
like a regular corner to corner.
Which is yes, and that's thank you for helping me because that's what I wanted to say originally.
Stand if I say it out loud. So.
So in the pattern that I showed during my video, we're working in rows, and then each row fills in the triangles left from the row before. If I'm doing entrelac as C to C, then I'm working in a diagonal, increasing and then decreasing when I reach the width I want.
Yes.
That took a lot for me to get out. I thank everyone for following me.
I have a question now, and I don't know if I'm going to be phrasing it properly, but you know the example you did where it was kind of like a zigzag at the bottom.
Yes.
If you wanted to square that off, is there a way to do sort of half triangles to fill in those spaces? Or would you need to do it from the start, or could you do it after?
No.
What's the best way to do it?
So in the pattern that I'm sharing in the VIP pass, I have those half triangles,
Do a-
those half squares, yeah, around the because you can choose to fill them out or not. But again, if you're doing C to C, if you're doing it like one square and then two and then three, your edges are going to be square. Yeah. But yes, you can do triangles. What you're going to do is you're just going to do halfway of the entrelac square and then move to the next triangle.
Okay. Yeah, I see. That makes sense. We have a question in the chat here that I'm just going to pop up for you. So, have you ever created entrelac garments with a color shifting, fading, or ombre yarn?
That would look amazing. I haven't, and so not that I don't think it's achievable to crochet a garment in entrelac, but it would be you would have to go with a very large hook for a smaller yarn, for a thinner yarn. It's such a thick fabric that you really want to help give it some drape. So fingering weight with like up to like a 6 millimeter maybe, just to give it some drape. But then, I mean, that would look absolutely stunning. And I think even in like a blanket or something like that, that could look really absolutely stunning. You're giving me ideas.
Yeah, I think so. And I don't know if you were with us earlier, but Abby actually had a sweater pattern really like that. So it was entrelac worked from the top down. So she had started off with like little squares, and then the increases were the entrelac squares getting bigger. And I think she had used a hand dyed yarn and gotten it kind of specially made so that there was a fade on the way
Oh,
down.
wow.
And it's stunning. Now, she said it was a lot of work, and that actually in her spreadsheet, she had to have a tab for every size because there was just so many differences, because if you
Yeah,
take that little square, it doesn't give you a lot of room for kind of tiny measurement changes. So
absolutely.
yeah, so it's
I'll
beautiful.
have to look at that.
I'm going to put it on my list. Yeah, I let me just find her link again and I'll pop it in.
Absolutely.
It's beautiful. Yeah. So I think for a blanket to start with might be much easier than doing that kind of a garment, I'm going to say.
That said, having the sizes and different tabs, that's something I've been toying with in my garments because I feel like a lot of the time, people that start with crochet aren't quite sure that they want to do garments because the instructions are hard to read. So I love that Abby Mae does that because I think even for a simpler garment, it's a little bit more work for the designer, but it
Mhm.
could make a
Yeah,
whole lot of difference.
yeah. I guess it's if you have to make a change on one tab, then you need to go.
That part would be annoying.
But she figured it out anyway, so she does have a lovely sweater in that style. If you wanted to try it, I'd say it's not a beginner pattern.
No, yeah, I found it
However,
quite.
you obviously you can use a regular hook because the rows are really short. So
Yes, that part's really cool about the entrelac method because it really allows you to try Tunisian crochet with the hooks you have at home. Um, I find that super interesting when you start a new hobby.
yeah, I think it's great, kind of to find that gateway project that can take you into the next phase. So we just have another question for you here. So I noticed in my entrelac swatch that I got a couple of holes in the corners between the rows. What do you think might be causing that?
I mean, that's just it could be that the slip stitch is not tight enough, but at the same time, like it is normal. We're working with yarn, right? We're not working with I don't know, wood or cement. There will be holes, and if you pull on your squares, you'll see between the stitches too. So maybe try to do tighter slip stitches, or it is what it is. I think unless like they're like really gaping, and then at that point you could use your ends to go close those holes. I don't think it would be. I think it's just normal.
Yeah, and it could just be that it's sometimes hard to get that first loop to stay the size that you want it to stay. So we talked about this at
That's
length
true.
yesterday because it's a really common problem and it still happens to me. And I think the conclusion we came to was that to watch your tension on the return pass, because if you're pulling that a little bit tight, you're loosening up that first loop every time you pull through. Um, so
And if you're
it happens so much, I would think, in entrelac because your rows are so much shorter, but it could be something to look at.
it's it is true that because the rows are shorter, it might actually happen more because you have more of those edge stitches than you would in a regular pattern.
Mhm.
The other thing is, I think as crocheters, we've been taught that once the loop falls off the hook, it's done. Knitters tighten their stitches, which we don't do. So maybe like on the edges, we can do a little bit of that tightening that we generally don't do. So that could also help.
Oh, that's a really good point. So do people do this in knitting? Sorry, I don't know anything about this. So they'll take like a yarn needle or something and just even out anywhere. No.
No, they do it as they're making their stitches, and that's like Patty Lyons was teaching me a little bit about knitting in Chicago at the beginning of the month. I mean, that's something nice to drop into a conversation. But so she was showing me, and when she was putting the stitches on her needle, she would tighten them to the size of the needle as she was pulling them up. And I was like, "What are you doing?" And she goes, "Well, you have to do that." And I'm like, what? In crochet is if it's fallen off the hook, it's done. You don't tighten it. You don't, because then you're gonna have like really tight tension, which is gonna be hard to work into. But that's just the difference. I would have never, I didn't know this before April. You know what I
Okay.
mean? I
I,
just found it.
I've never heard of it either. So do you think you could do that with your Tunisian forward pass? Could you like adjust all your loops before you started the return pass? Or do you think it wouldn't work?
Well, I would maybe do it just with the edge stitches, but I wouldn't do it throughout because then it's going to curl because the stitches, and that's one thing that I find people do a lot, like they don't pull the loop higher than the row that they're on, which makes the stitches bunch up. So if you want less curling, you have to make sure that when you're pulling up the loops, you're pulling them up above the row that you're working on to the height of the stitches.
Okay.
So doing it at the beginning, yes. At the end, yes, but not in the middle. Otherwise, you're going to curl. And with entrelac, you're going to curl a lot again because those rows are so much shorter.
So does entrelac curl more, do you think, than like a normal Tunisian simple stitch, or is it about the same?
I think it's about the same, which ends up where your project does curl more at the beginning because it curls just as much, but there's so many more beginnings. You know, and it like the whole
The points that can curl.
exactly all of your squares that are part of your first row all have a first row that's curling. So it does make the project curl a bit more. It'll always resolve, or most often it will resolve when you are blocking or as you put your border around the work, but it does tend to curl a bit, which is why the swatch is super important too. Like swatching, always important, and it's not a matter of oh, but I have perfect tension. That doesn't exist. You actually have to try.
Yeah, because you might know exactly what your tension is for one hook and one type of yarn, but then you might try a different type of yarn, even if it's the same weight, and your tension is just going to be
100%.
different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and especially, well, I don't know if this is just me, but the Tunisian, I find my tension is so different depending on the stitch pattern that
Me
I'm
too.
working, and I have to change the hook by like a millimeter sometimes.
Yeah, I can't trust it with
Yeah,
Tunisian.
I can't trust it. Yeah, because I think with regular crochet, I know pretty much now if I see a pattern written with a certain yarn hook, I'm like, oh, I'm going to have to go up a hook size there. But yeah, I can't tell with the Tunisian. Maybe
No,
it's time.
there must be something about the way the stitches are built where it's completely different to regular crochet, and so all our hints about what we know just don't work the same way. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe with like years and years under your belt, but you do have that, so
Well, yeah, but it's a technique. It's not as well known as regular crochet. So even now, like there's a lot more people talking about it, but I don't think we have like the decades to compare yet. So
yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. So I just want to ask you about stitch dictionaries as well, actually, because
mhm.
I was talking with Courtney about this yesterday, and we were just saying that there are not as many stitch dictionaries or books or resources for Tunisian stitch patterns compared to normal crochet. We'll say, so seeing as you like collecting things, do you have a book collection as well, or no?
I do.
Okay, good.
I do, and I'm looking at it right now because it's like behind my laptop. I'm looking because the top is all my stitch books, all my stitch Bibles and things. And it is true, like Courtney's right, there aren't that many for Tunisian crochet. I did find a few on Amazon, um, but the most I've found, the biggest resources I've found have been online. So Kim Guzman has
Yeah,
a crazy number of different stitch patterns on her website. But then like the thing I'll do is just go on to Amazon.com. I prefer Amazon.ca from Canada, but it doesn't have the same options in terms of stitch pattern books internationally. So a lot of the Japanese books will have Tunisian crochet interspersed in the regular crochet because
okay.
they don't necessarily differentiate between the two. But yeah, so I just go into the search bar and there's always new options that appear, and I've there is a lack. There's definitely a need for more dictionaries for Tunisian stitches beyond
Yeah,
the basics.
beyond the basics, yeah, because there's loads of tutorials for the basics, but then once you go a little bit past that, there's less, isn't there?
Right, right.
Yeah. So in those Japanese books for the Tunisian stitches, is it a chart?
Yes.
So you would need to know how to read the
Yes,
Tunisian.
and it's really funny because, well, not funny, cute, and also very nice of them. But whenever I order a book from a Japanese publisher, they will send a message saying There are no written instructions in this. The ones that are there are in Japanese, but there are charts. Do you still want the book? And then, so they're like actually making sure that we understand what we're buying.
Yeah.
So yes, it is stitch charts with some Japanese or Chinese characters, depending on where you're getting the book from. Sorry, Japan has more from what I've seen.
Mhm.
Um, but you're totally fine as long as you can read charts. And I see that Anne has a question in the chat. The name is Kim Guzman. It's
I'm just going to pop her website,
G-U-Z-M-A,
her
Kushaken.
crochet Kim. Yeah. I think she has a second website as well. Let me just find that too, so that you can find her in all the places. Um,
I love how collaborative like our space is.
I know, it's great, isn't it? Well, look, I mean, there are millions of crafters in the world, and there's room for everybody to share
I agree.
their designs and their knowledge for sure.
Hmm.
I was going to say something else to you there now, but I can't remember what it was. I think it was something about the stitch. Oh yeah, it was about the stitch charts. So Sarah from Hook Loop Sarah did a really interesting video for,
Okay.
you'll have to go watch it, all about stitch charts. And I mean, what she was saying, it kind of mirrors the availability of Tunisian resources in general, and that like for the basic stitches, there are some standard symbols. But then
Yes.
as you go into slightly more intricate patterns or things that are outside the simple stitch, knit, purl, reverse stitch, there are very few standards. So she, I think, had written a book and they'd wanted her to come up with a stitch chart for all of the patterns. And she ended up having to make up a lot of the symbols
Oh,
because
that's so
there
cool.
was nothing that she could find in existence. So that's really cool. And she had some really good ideas as well about having a different symbol for like the first loop on the hook and then the end stitch and everything, which is really useful, I think, because
I
it's so hard to know, isn't it, how to count your stitches
I know.
starting. Yeah.
That tripped me up a lot when I started because again, there's like much fewer resources online for it. So you have to like troubleshoot with yourself. And it's funny because in the collective I founded right before I left for Chicago, they we had a discussion about like there's a lack of standards in Tunisian crochet in French. So if you think it's hard to get the standards in English, they they just don't exist in French. So we're actually going to be working on that to create. So I'm going to look at that to make sure that we harmonize.
Yeah, it's really informative actually. And I love charts. So
Me
I
too.
know not everybody loves them, but I mean, for me, give me a small chart over 2 pages of written instructions.
That's
Yeah, and I
100%.
see it, I see what it's going to look like. I can visualize the stitches, but when it's all written out, I find that personally harder. Um, so I would love to get more people into
A
charts.
hundred. Oh yeah.
I don't know if we could do
I.
someone about crochet charts. Possibly not. But yeah, I love them anyway. So I think we are coming to the end of our half hour. So I'm just going to grab the link for the VIP pass. And like Julie mentioned, she has contributed a beautiful blanket pattern to that. So if you do want to check that out, you can do so. And we also have 13 other patterns from all of the speakers in the summit, as well as lifetime access to all of these videos and Q&As and this lovely Tunisian crochet guidebook as well that is kind of based on all of the video classes, but it is put into article and photo tutorial format. So
It's beautiful.
it
You
came
worked so
out.
hard on that.
Well, I love Canva, so I did it in Canva, and I have to say I was in my element, even though I probably spent too long on it. I should have, but I really enjoyed it. So
It's
I think it
gorgeous.
came out really nice. I think it's going to be a really good resource to have. So I think that's it. Julie, do you want to just tell us the best place for people to find you? Is it your website or Instagram, or where are you the most active?
So my everything is on my website. So that's accrochet.com, ACCROCHET.com. From there, you'll get links to everywhere else I am, but I would say subscribe to my newsletter because I love social media, but I'm not very good at it. So if you want to make sure not to miss anything, it will be through my newsletter. And to anyone who's registered to my newsletter this weekend for my freebie. I know that there's a glitch in the it's not sending. Everyone will get the freebie tomorrow. It's being sent to the entire list so that no one misses out on it. So even if you missed it yesterday, if you sign up today, you'll get the freebie tomorrow.
Okay, so go to accrochet.com now.
Yes.
And you'll get that freebie. Yeah, super. Oh, like there's always technology glitches. I think there's nothing
Always.
except just laugh and carry on.
That's right. I mean, what else are we going to do?
What else are you going to do? All right, we leave it there. I think, Julie, thank you so much. This has been such a lovely chat. And anybody who could stick around, please do, because I will be chatting with Veronica in about 25 minutes time.
Thank you very much.
See you soon.